All right. Welcome to Lockdown Learning for Monday, April 27th, 2020. I'd like to welcome our special guest, Rick Kueber. Rick is CEO of Suntan City, one of the co-founders. I keep forgetting I got to mute my own YouTube here. I end up talking in my ear. All right, there we go. All right. So I forget, I'm not as fancy as any of the, the Tom Bilyeu's or the Gary V's. I don't have somebody running sound for me. I got to do it myself. So I do want to thank Rick for being here. Rick is a great friend. He's somebody who, for a couple of years, I kept hearing from people who were friends of mine, you got to meet this guy, Rick. I think you guys will really get along. And I think Rick kept hearing from some people, you got to meet this guy, Adam. I think you're going to really get along. And then we ended up having the opportunity about 2.5 years ago to hang out up in Kentucky. We met through the whiskey community up there and realized we have a lot in common in terms of being entrepreneurs, in terms of being family guys, in terms of being dads, in terms of being focused husbands, in terms of being involved in the community and giving back. And I've gotten to know Rick and what his heart's like and what his business is like, and hear some pretty inspiring stories from and about him and see the way he's been able to give back to his community. So everybody please welcome Rick. So Rick, hello. Well, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
So, I'm going to ask you questions for about half of the time. What we generally do is the guys can private chat me if they have questions about halfway through. And when somebody's got a great question that matches the line, then we will go ahead and pull it up and I will let them ask a question. So first of all, tell us a little bit about your upbringing and kind of your background and how you got started in business in general.
Yeah, all right. So I grew up in rural Meade County, about 45 minutes from where I'm sitting today in downtown Louisville. I grew up on a farm, a very small farm, about 33 acres. We had 300 sheep. So, I always say that farming taught me some really important things. I mean, it taught me the value of hard work. Farming is 24/7, 365. That, animals are much like kids. They don't listen very well. They're, even harder to communicate with. And I mean, they required nonstop care. So I didn't grow up in, I'd say, average, middle-class upbringing. My dad had, a pretty good career as an entrepreneur, or a very small-time entrepreneur. But farming also taught me the value of money. Farming is a business, and I grew up in a business, and with live animals, and I was very fortunate in that sense. When I was about 8 years old, my dad loaned me $400 to buy 5 sheep. And, sheep are kind of like rabbits, man. They just multiply. And by the time I was 16 years old, I had about $40,000 to my name, which is a lot more than the average 16-year-old. And so what's a 16-year-old do? I bought a brand new Mustang GT, a 87 Mustang GT for $13,354.13. So that was, a great thing for a 16-year-old. I got in a lot of trouble. I think I got arrested a couple times for speeding. I wasn't a great kid. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, so you could drive really fast without much repercussion. So, except getting arrested. But really, the most important thing that farming taught me was I didn't want to be a farmer because it kind of sucks. It's hard work. I mean, it's really, really, really hard work. I have so much appreciation today for people that farm. I mean, I still, one of my next door neighbors growing up, he's got like 20,000 acres and, a ton of land and so forth. And I mean, it's hard work. And I mean, you don't get to take vacations. It's not a glamorous lifestyle. I mean, I spent a lot of my weekends and time away from school doing things that aren't very fun. So, that was a good portion of my upbringing. My dad, as I did mention, was an entrepreneur. Not a great one. He lacked one very fundamental trait of an entrepreneur, and that was risk taking. He was probably the most conservative risk taker or most conservative entrepreneur that there was. And in the end, that ended up costing him a lot of money. And I'm just the opposite. I'm the ultimate risk taker. And so that really was my upbringing. I was the youngest of 5 children. So I was, by the time I was growing up, my mother was really tired of raising kids. Dad was always at work. And my mom, I always tell the story. She used to take me school shopping. And her idea of school shopping with her 5th child was, here's $200. I'll be back to pick you up in a couple hours. and that was reality. I was 8, 9, 10 years old, and basically living very independently. So I've always been very, very independent from that upbringing. I mean, she was a great mother in a lot of ways, but in that way, she maybe neglected me a little bit.
Understand. So I know your first business, aside from the sheep, right,
Yep.
was your family. You and your brother, I think, had some video stores, right?
Yeah, so that was a business that my father had started, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about pivoting into different situations, and this really was a pivot in a way. He was a Marine. He got out of the Marines. He bought some gas stations in Southern California, sold those, made some money. He then ended up bidding on a contract on Fort Knox here in Kentucky to open an equipment rental store. Didn't really know anything about that, but ended up moving the family when I was 1 from Southern California to Kentucky. And then he ended up in the rent-to-own business, which was an offspring of that rental store. And then ended up he was renting to own Betamax players, Sony Betamax. You guys are all way too young probably to remember those. But it was really the precursor to VHS tapes, which was the precursor to DVDs. And people were like, "Hey, Mr. Kueber, I'd rent to own that beta machine that costs like $1,000, but there's nowhere to get a movie." So he and I actually drove to a place called Waxworks, which was in Owensboro, Kentucky, and went down there and bought 31 cassettes for about $800. And that was the beginning of Video Vault. He had opened 2 stores when I was probably age 10 to 16. And when I wasn't at the farm, I was working at the behind the counter at at those locations. It was a really, really fun business. I don't know if you guys ever worked in video rental or at a movie theater. I mean, it's a whole lot of fun to be in that business or that type of business. Then my brother got out of college. My brother's 10 years older than me. He got out of college, worked on Capitol Hill for a little bit, and then came back here and joined my father. They opened 7 more locations. And then my brother eventually bought those locations from my father. I then went to college. I went to Marquette University. I was not a good student. I mean, I'm the prime example of, hustle can turn out well. I was the world's worst student. I had a lot of fun in college. It was, there's a lot of beer in Milwaukee, more than one person could drink, but damn, I tried. And, it really was, I had a great time in college, and I wouldn't say that I learned a ton in college, honestly. I learned, the first thing I learned in econ, I still remember the one thing that stuck with me on Econ 101 on the first day of school was that, or the first day of my freshman year, it was, there's no such thing as free lunch. So now people always call me, they're like, "I'll buy you lunch." I'm like, no, I'll pass. That's going to cost me a lot of money in the end. So, that is one thing I learned, but college to me is really about growing up and maturing. It's you live in a dorm. I refer to dorms, and I tell my children this, it's kind of like a halfway house to adulthood. You have a resident advisor that's a couple years older than you, and something goes wrong, they call mom and dad, and or you get in trouble, which can happen. But I wasn't a great college student, but then I got out of college in 92. I was there from 88 to 92. Got done with school and then moved back. I started working for my brother. I then got a loan to open my first video store. I was still working for my brother and my father, and I was the district manager for their locations, which was, I was 22 years old, and most of my employees were in their 30s and 40s, which was, it's somewhat of a difficult situation to begin with, but we both got comfortable with that over time. Opened my own video stores, ended up opening 13 video stores, and then went from there. You want me to go into the next step, Adam,
so
on the videos?
I remember when we were first getting to know each other, I was asking you how you got into the business that you're in now, and you told me a story about, I think, did you read Simon Sinek's Infinite Game book?
No, I did not.
It's awesome, and it's talking about the idea that as soon, business is not a finite game. There's no one winner, there's no one loser, and there's no set rules, right? The players and the rules change every day. And you were in an industry, in the video rental industry, where there were 2 major players, right? You had Hollywood Video and Blockbuster. Mm-hmm. And they were of the opinion that as long as they kept the local guys out, and as long as they continued doing what they were doing, that they were pretty much invincible.
Yeah.
And a lot of mom and pops that were like you, when they saw digital change coming and they saw new things coming, they played ostrich and buried their head in the sand, because they just figured that whatever it was would pass just like any other storm, and didn't realize that an entire industry was changing. You
Yeah.
and your brother, it sounds like, had a little bit of a different view, and I know you noticed something along the way and you made a pretty big shift. So what was that shift?
Yeah. So, what had happened was, we operated stores mostly in rural markets and, towns of 10,000 to 20,000. So, secondary markets, like towns I grew up in. And, so we had a big trade show every year, the VSDA convention. It was, a great, Hollywood did it right. They spent tens of millions on the convention, and everybody from all around the world came and talked about the industry. And what had happened was the tanning bed manufacturers started showing up at the convention saying, hey, we've got this perfect device to put in the back of your video rental store that helps offset your seasonality. So in the video rental business, the winter was very, very busy. People cooped up inside. They rented a lot of movies. But then the first time, when you had weather like we have today, it's 70 and sunny outside, crickets, nothing in the stores. Basically we'd go from a couple $1,000s a day in rentals to $50, or I remember some days where we had no revenue, period. And so what happened was we started trickling in some tanning beds. Tanning beds at the time were $2,000 or $3,000 a piece. Very, very elementary, basic, 24 lamp bed like you would see in home use today. And then, so we started putting these beds in, and suddenly, our seasonality went away. We're doing more revenue in March, April, and May, which is tanning season, than we were in the winter. And these beds cost, like I said, $2,000. We're bringing in $3,000 to $4,000 a month per bed. I'm like, wow, this is a great return. And I'm like, and we had people waiting 2 weeks to get into a tanning bed, which is crazy. And they were waiting on the sidewalks. We made all kinds of mistakes, but our video rentals stores did really well. In 2002, we had an opportunity to exit the video rental business. We had actually three main competitors: Blockbuster, Hollywood, and Movie Gallery. Movie Gallery is a chain out of Dothan, Alabama. They specialized in secondary markets, much like the markets we were in. So they were a public company on the NASDAQ under MOVI. And we had the opportunity to sell to them at a really high multiple. I think it was 7 or 8x at the time, which we thought was a lot of money. I was 32 years old. I thought there was gonna be enough money to live forever. Boy, was I wrong. I quickly spent that on tanning beds. I think it was in 1999, before we exited video rental fully. We started, I was sitting around with my brother one day. I said, hey, I think there's something to this tanning. There's a lot of demand. And, what if we open a tanning salon, a really big one? All these little tanning salons have 6 or 8 beds. I'm like, what if we do like 30 or 40 beds? And I'm like, it's so big, it's like a city, like Suntan City. And that's what we ended up calling it. We opened our first store in '99 in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, which is a market about 25,000 people. It's a little bit larger than we had been accustomed to. We were instantly tanning 800 to 1,000 people a day. Didn't know how to make money. We weren't making money because it takes a lot of labor to clean 800 to 1,000 tanning beds a day. And, but we finally figured it out. I met a guy in Houston, Texas, a couple of years later that had a recurring revenue program, $18.88 a month, unlimited tanning. Give us your credit card number and we'll sign you up. And, once we pivoted to that, to that model of recurring revenue, it just grew every year, from 5% of our business, 10%. I think today it's around 55% of our business. Today we have 270 locations that are all shut down, but we have 270 physical locations in 23 states. From Adam, I know you're in Atlanta. We don't have any Atlanta. We have some in north of Atlanta, I think Rome and Dalton, Georgia.
Yeah.
We got a bunch in Tennessee. We go all the way to the East Coast. Our first franchisee was in Maine. And I joked that they were far enough away. If they failed, nobody would ever know here in Kentucky. But it's a reality. It really was. I was like, this is kind of a no risk proposition. If it doesn't work out, nobody really will know. But they a group is 4 Mormon brothers opened those, and they've got 18 salons in 2 states, and it has been, I guess, 15 years now that they've been up there and been a great franchisee.
So you guys have expanded to have 270 stores. How many of them are company owned still?
About 100. I think 98 are company owned.
And the rest of them are all franchises?
Yeah, the rest are franchise. We have 28 franchisees. Most of them have multiple units. We've not had a franchisee failure yet. We've got a couple that are, I would say, at risk right now, coming out of COVID. This pandemic could not have hit at a worse time for our business. March, April, May being our 3 busiest months that represent about 70% of our revenue. So, it's a pretty dire situation for tanning salons across the nation. There's about 5,000 tanning salons today. The largest tanning competitor that we have today is Planet Fitness, which I'm also a franchisee, which we can get into that next.
Well, right. So, I know it's been a crazy time, and I know when we were texting earlier today, I was saying, I know you guys have had a lot going on, so I appreciate you being able to do this with us.
Yeah, no, it's talking about Planet Fitness. So Planet Fitness is based in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I was
up there, right?
Yeah, it's a beautiful
Hundreds
city.
of people.
Yeah. It's a beautiful city, and I don't know why they're there, but that's where Planet Fitness started. So I started seeing them quite a bit when I was up there, visiting the locations in Maine. Maine and New Hampshire, aren't really big places, so they kind of run together. And I started seeing Planet Fitness up there, and I wasn't really that impressed with them. Most of their stores up there or clubs were much older, smaller clubs, 6,000 to 10,000 square feet. But I happened to be in Raleigh, North Carolina, a couple years later, and I think this was maybe 2010. And I was there visiting the market with a franchisee, a Suntan City franchisee, and we saw all these dancing balloons and banners and everything up in front of a brand new Planet Fitness that said they were now open. So we stopped in there, and just happened to run into the right person, to the manager that was way too forthcoming. She told us they just opened, they had 6,000 members, they had 1,000 visits the day before. And I was like, wow, that sounds like a lot of business. So I knew one of the guys selling them tanning beds. So I immediately got out of there and I texted my buddy Greg. And I said, Greg, can you introduce me to their CEO? And he's like, call me. And I called him, and he said, Rick, you're not going to believe this. I just bought the rights to Kansas City. These guys are all driving Lamborghinis and Ferraris, and they have no clue what they're doing. They're morons. So he's like, guys like you and I will kill it. So I came out of there. I think I hopped on a plane the next week. I was in New Hampshire, negotiating to buy the rights for Louisville, Kentucky. I had to repurchase them from a guy that lived in New Hampshire that already purchased them. But I was able to get that deal done. I had to pay him about $150,000 premium for the franchise rights to Louisville. We opened Louisville, did really well. Came back, bought franchise rights, some more franchise rights next year, then more the next year, more the next year. So we ended up with franchise rights about 90 locations. We got up to 65 last year before we sold 26 of them for a little bit more than $100 million, which was a really nice hit. And we were really glad to do that, and it ended up being really good timing, obviously, with this crisis that's upon us. But today we've got 35 locations. We can build another about 15, most of them in rural markets. We've long specialized in, even go back to, my video store days, and then even with our tanning salons, we've got a lot of them in small towns, and, there's a lot of advantages to operating in a small town. So we have a lot of Planet Fitnesses in small towns that do really well, but we also have some, larger cities like Louisville that do extremely well.
And you're also involved. One of the things that I really admire is you see opportunity everywhere. A lot of people see problems, you see opportunities. So a lot of business owners in the video rental business saw problems. You saw opportunities. I've got these physical locations, let's turn them into something else. You also are involved in the construction of the salons, right?
Yeah. No, we worked really hard on construction. We actually have our own internal general contractor. We developed a wall system so we can roll into a town and put a salon together in 7 to 10 days once the electrical's done and the HVAC. We can do that. So that's been the wall business for us has been really good with the tanning salons. I mean, basically have prefabricated walls that can go up really fast, and that's been a great business for us. But certainly I'm an entrepreneur first and foremost, but I'm a very opportunistic person. Even back in my video rental days, we did video rental, but we sold whatever the consumers demanded. I probably sold $5 million worth of Beanie Babies those godforsaken animals that everyone did. I was lucky enough to secure a license at one location and have a direct account. So, I was in these small towns again. There wasn't a lot of. I had to deal with the Hallmark that was trying to get them as well, but I made some money on that. We sold. I had video stores off the base of Fort Knox, two in Radcliffe, Kentucky. We sold calling cards. I mean, you guys are probably too young to remember calling cards. And we sold millions of dollars of calling cards because the soldiers wanted to call home when they come to basic training. That's the first thing they want to do is go to the payphone and call home. And Pokemon cards. I mean, I can go on and on and on about the things that we sold over the years. So, again, being very opportunistic. I didn't go to college to be in the tanning business. I didn't go to college to be in the gym business. It really just sometimes opportunity knocks and you see it. And, if there's demand, you just got to find the business that has, the right amount of demand. And, you think you have an opportunity to fill it with a product that, you're aware of.
So that being said, I've watched over the last couple of years I've known you, and I know I've known you through some pretty good times. But earlier in your career, you really got into entrepreneurship, aside from the sheep from 6 to 16 in your early 20s. Do you have any major oh shit moments along the way that made you question yourself?
Yeah, I was in the video rental business, and it was probably in the mid to late 90s. I became a franchisee of a pizza place called Pizza Magia. That basically was a couple of guys that left Papa John's and started their own brand, and they had gained some momentum. And I ended up buying the rights to 5 or 6 locations, thinking I could do just as well in that. And, I got into that, and, it did not end well. They, I think it was 9/11 hit. So that was 2001, right? And 9/11 just tanked that business, the delivery business. And I had stores on the base outside of Fort Knox, and we couldn't get on base where all our customers were, and due to security issues. So it ended up becoming problematic. And but the one thing I learned from that, that I really learned from that, is when you look at opportunity, especially when it comes to the franchise space, there's plenty of proven models out there. Go with it. You don't want to be the first franchisee, or even in on the front end of the franchise spectrum when it comes to a business. Find a proven model of whatever business it is, and go with that. There's a time to take a risk, and there's I would probably take a greater risk today at this point in my career. But at that point I was in my late 20s and just started a family, and that wasn't the time to be taking the risk. And ended up costing me about $750,000, and that was a pretty painful hit. And fortunately the tanning business was taking off, and I was in hindsight it was kind of a blessing because I was able to dedicate all my time to indoor tanning.
So a lot of people, a lot of people we work with are in their early 20s. People start with us right out of college, and our business is completely shut down right now as well, just like yours is. And so we're using this time to hone everybody's skills, to train everyone to work on their leadership ability, and to educate people. So I've got this series of lunch, our lockdown learning, where we've got different entrepreneurs on talking. And one of the things that I'm asking everybody we're talking to, especially people who have built their own businesses, which is almost, I guess, everybody we're talking to, is people are big on talking about balance. So you've got an awesome family, you got 3 kids, you're married, you stay in awesome shape, you're building multiple companies, you're balancing a lot of different, you're spinning a lot of different plates all at once. You're very involved in your community, you give a ton to charity, you're involved at Louisville, you're involved, back with your high school. What are some tips that you have of how do you get it all done? How do you stay focused and present in all your different roles?
I'm not perfect at it. I mean, it's certainly a challenge. And if you ask my wife and kids, everybody always say, Dad's always on the phone. That's, one of the blessings is I'm able to be with them at a good portion of time. I actually went home for lunch today. And, but with these devices, it's somewhat hard to always be present. And that's one of the things that I'm consistently working on is, hey, let's have some device-free time. And the kids are just as guilty as I am. The kids want to get on their cell phone. So I have a 13-year-old, a 17-year-old, and a 20-year-old boy, 17-year-old boy, and 13-year-old daughter. And, they're, of course, they have their lives and at this point and are pretty independent children. But, they want to be on their devices. But really, when it comes to finding that balance, it's just, carving out that time. And, you only, especially with children, I mean, you only get one shot at raising these kids. And, I don't want to be a bad parent. In fact, one of our core values at our business is, we're only going to hire people that are good parents, and that put their family first. If you're a crappy parent and all you want to do is work and leave your kid at daycare, 90 hours a week, I probably don't want you. I'd rather you go home and work from a flex position. And even if the kid's screaming in the background from time to time, that's fine. I want you to be a good parent, a good husband, a good wife, good spouse, and put your family first. I mean, and that really has been, a huge part of our core values from day one. Is, I've told people that from, a lot of people come out of a workforce where they're, from a workplace where they're asked to work 70, 80, 90 hours, and, the company always comes first, and that's it. And we've just been the opposite. And it's been, family first, and then, you're going to get your job done after that. But we want you to make time for your family.
Very cool. So I've got some questions from the audience here. I'm going to unmute my friend Alan from Charlotte. Alan, you there?
Okay.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Appreciate you, Adam. What's going on, Rick?
Not much, man. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So, when owning your business at such a young age, age of 22, what were the things of like obstacles you faced, and what did you do to overcome those obstacles and excel exponentially within your business and your company?
Really the biggest challenge at that age is respect. Respect from employees, and respect from, people all the way down to your landlords. I remember showing up to sign my first lease. Back in the day, you had to go to their office and sign the lease. And I negotiated everything over the fax machine, over the phone. And then I show up and knock on the door, and a guy named Carl Austin in Brandenburg, Kentucky. And I said, "Hey, I'm Rick Kueber. I'm here to sign the lease." He's like, "You're awfully young." And I'm like, "Well, your shopping center's awfully vacant. So, you got one choice here." And he ended up, actually, Carl is probably 80 years old today, and he has been very much a mentor to me. I mean, I've got a ton of respect for the guy. He is a fantastic human being, and he and I still laugh about that day all the time.
So I think a lot of the people that we who are on this call right now are going to be in a similar situation where the way our business works is people have an opportunity to train and develop people and earn their way into a management role. And a lot of these guys are in their 20s, and obviously unemployment, these guys were in before all the coronavirus stuff hit. And we're going to have a lot of people who are entering the workforce for the first time in a long time. Unemployment's going to go from 3% to somewhere between 14 and 18% most likely. And a lot of those people are going to be older in the sense of, late 20s to mid 40s, and are going to be looking for opportunities. And for the first time in a long time, we're going to have people applying for entry-level sales positions with management and upward potential. And these guys who are in their early 20s or mid 20s are going to have an opportunity to step up and manage and lead people who are sometimes twice their age. So what advice do you have along that same line? What's the best way to earn respect and to really establish yourself as a leader when the people you're responsible for are sometimes twice your age and 3 times your level of experience?
I think it really comes down to operating and carrying yourself in a very mature fashion. I think that, one of the things I always say, there's 3 things you can't teach: integrity, maturity, and motivation. And, if you can, I've seen really, I've got some great employees at age 18, 19, 20, they were the most mature and, human beings ever. But then I've had, a 40-year-old man that is, got the maturity of an 18-year-old, which never ends well. And, those people just don't advance. And, I think if you can operate yourself with maturity, with integrity, you can be motivated, you lead by example, and then I think you earn their respect. But you're right, Adam, you've got to earn that respect. And sometimes it takes time. And, sometimes, I've had a few employees over the years that just can't cope with it, and they just have to move on.
Good call. So Giselle from Birmingham, Alabama, you're up. Giselle, there we go.
I muted myself. Hi, Rick. So my question for you is, what are some things that you're teaching your children on being successful and opportunistic?
I think, one of the important learnings for children, and I think it's everywhere. I wish schools would teach us, is really understanding money and the value of money. And, opportunistic is, one thing that I think I lead by example in that sense. They see me pivoting left and right. And I can tell you about 5 other businesses I'm in that Adam probably doesn't even know about at this point. But, it's really, leading by example and kind of talking through. I mean, they see me doing these things, so I'm constantly talking to them and telling them what I'm thinking. And that really is, how I'm doing it. But, teaching, if you can learn to manage money and understand, you don't have to be an accountant, but if you can read a basic income statement and understand, what drives, profit and loss, and what expenses are controllable, then, business is pretty simple from that standpoint, once you master that.
Excellent. So we've got Khalid, actually from Lexington.
All right, Kentucky fan or Louisville fan? We got to clarify this.
Oof, I'm neither. I'm actually a Duke fan.
Oh, that's even worse. So,
so my question for you is, when you start a new business venture, how do you build and maintain momentum?
I think you've got to get, you've got to be excited about it, but your people have to be excited about it. We've got a new business venture called Buff City Soap. I don't know if anybody's heard of it. I'm sure some of you have. They've got about 30, 40 locations right now. We started, I never thought I'd be in a soap business, but here we are. We got the franchise. I actually own about 1/3 of the company now. We bought into that last fall, and we signed the rights to 140 locations. And, what we did there, when
why do I know the name? Because you didn't tell me about it. Did Bella tell me?
She probably posted something on
Probably
Facebook.
saw it online. That's
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So it's this great product. It's a natural soap product made of plant-based materials, and everything's made in the store. But, when I remember talking to my staff about it in executive meeting, they're like, what? Why are you talking about the soap business? Like, and I'm like, guys, here, let me tell you about this. Here's really, here's what the product is. You can go to the website, buffcitysoap.com, and look them up. It's a really cool product. These guys it's a lot like Planet Fitness. They kind of don't have their story straight yet, but they're all making money. The economics of the brand are really good. And you know what? I've got a whole box of samples coming. The CEO is actually going to show up here in about 30 minutes and give everybody samples. And, so I was able to create that excitement. And that really is the key, is getting your staff excited. And, a lot of things we talk about, even in our other businesses, especially at Suntan City, where we have control, Planet Fitness, a lot of the things we do are dictated by the franchisor. So we don't have complete control there. But at Suntan City, one of the things that we learned is it's just important. It's just as important for us to bring in new products and other items that excite our employees. Because employees, if you see the same 20 items behind your counter every day, it kind of gets boring, right? But you get the new thing, get the new iPhone, you get the new whatever behind the counter. It's exciting, and then you get excited. Then your customers get excited, and it really goes from there. So that really has been our key, is to get people excited about it. But I will tell you, on the Buff City Soap, I got a really funny story on this. And I was telling my wife one day, I'm like, I gotta get rid of LinkedIn. I just get all these salesmen people trying to sell me stuff on LinkedIn. And this guy from Buff City Soap, I happened to check my messages one day, and he's like, hey, Rick, my name's Justin Delaney. We've got these mutual friends. I'd love to have coffee. I'm like, oh shit, free coffee. That's even worse than free lunch. And so I ended up taking it, but only because we had, some, pretty notable mutual friends, guys that were really well respected. And I ended up having lunch with a guy. He was local to me, or I had coffee with him, and ended up connecting with him and saying, hey, I like the guy, and I kind of like the story of the brand, and I really love the economics. And it doesn't cost a whole lot to make a bar of soap, and they sell for quite a bit of money. And hey, what better time to be in the soap business than this crisis, right?
Your timing was definitely good there.
Yeah, really good. So, yeah.
Yeah, Rick, thank you very much for doing the call for us.
You're welcome.
Question is there a process or a basic guideline for how you determine when to pivot in the face of adversity or different changes to the market, or when to take the team in a different direction as opposed to kind of doubling down in the same direction you've been going? Like, how do you make that decision? And what are some tips for that?
Well, that's always a difficult call, but it really comes down to, your time. How much time do you have to do that, and do your people have time? I mean, we were at, with Suntan City right now. We're in a very, very mature state, and like our Planet Fitness business was maturing. We don't have much development rights left, so we were looking for something. I've got this great construction team, and this great team of people. I'm like, what? I need to find something else to do that is not just those two core businesses. So we were looking for a pivot. It doesn't always happen that way. Planet Fitness just kind of we kind of lucked into that, and Planet Fitness is probably one of the maybe a once in a lifetime investment on our end. It just happened to be the right place, right time, and that was a little bit of luck. But really, it's about your people and your time, because we are able to share a lot of services. We have one marketing department, one accounting department for all these businesses. And, that's really helpful. And, we have to have, some incremental hiring has to happen when we do that. But, it really comes down to the time of your people and yourself. I mean, that's one thing you only have 24 hours in the day. And I don't think any of us want to work 18 or 20 of those.
So Rick, these guys I'm getting a lot of questions on here. You got a lot of young people, and
okay.
It's very, very much, I've known, I got to meet Isaac a while back, and I got to know your son, your oldest son. That this generation, a lot of people want to be involved in a million different things. And, they're hearing your story about all these different businesses you're involved in, but this is not something you did right away. You didn't go and say, all right, I've got $1,000. I'm going to go put 250 of it in 4 different businesses and see what happens.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. I mean, the old saying, it takes money to make money. It's always, that's kind of an old saying, but it does ring true. I mean, I had to make some money first, to have some money to invest in other products or other projects. And, so I was 28, 29. So I was 7 years into my career before, I pivoted or attempted to pivot in the pizza business, and then ended up in the tanning business, and then the gym business, now the soap business, and a few others. And it really does take some time. I mean, you have to put money away. You have to build some wealth. And I kind of laugh when I hear people say, well, all I need is $1 million. I'll never have to work again. I'm like, that's not going to get you real far in life, honestly. So it it just takes time. You got to be patient. But I'm telling you, it's one of the things I always tell people. If I talked about those 3 things earlier about integrity, maturity, and motivation. Like, if you want to stand out in your career today, hustle. Like, motivation, hustle. Like, I honestly, one of the things that sets me apart is I'm really good at building systems and figuring out how to do things faster and better. I may not be doing it at 100%, but if I could do it 5 times at 98%, I'll take that any day of the week. And I'm really good at building systems and hustling and working hard. And, it kills me when I see this current generation and they're behind the counter at a restaurant, and they're just meandering around, staring at their phone. And I'm like, man, I could have ran and got the order, been back and waited on another customer already. And, if you could hustle, I mean, that really, Adam, I know you probably agree with that, is, finding people that have that motivation today. If you want to stick out and advance your career, hustle, like, just flat out hustle.
So we've got a question, another Lexington question here, and this is from Hannah in Lexington. Now, I have not mentioned the fact that you have another business you've been involved in for a few years, and that is the horse racing business.
Yes.
So you were one of the partial owners of Justify, who won the Derby a couple of years ago. Hannah, what's your question?
I just wanted to, well, thank you so much for being here. And I'm a huge fan of Suntan City too. I tan. It's amazing.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. What made you go into the business? Was it for fun? Was it like, okay, I'm from Kentucky, I just have to do it? Or what was it that just motivated you to do that?
If you're here in Kentucky, it's a prerequisite to drink bourbon and go to the horse races. So I grew up, going to the track with my dad. My dad was a avid gambler. He never really owned horses, but I had some really good friends that were in the business, and I bought into their syndicate. There's about 13 of us in that group, and I guess it was 4 years ago I started investing in that group, $200,000 a year into that, and it's been a lot of fun. I think today we Not just, I've got some horses, I have some yearlings on my own. I've got 6 yearlings on my own, couple that actually will be at Keeneland later this week. And, I think we have 65, 67 horses. We've had, in 2018, we had 2 Derby horses. We had Justify and Audible. Last year, we had 2, Cutting Humor and Improbable. And this year, right now, we have 2 of the top 3 favorites. We have a horse named Charlatan that'll run at Arkansas Derby this week. In the first, they split that into 2 divisions. So Charlatan's going to run in the first division of that. We've got another horse named Saratogian that's going to be in the second division. And then we got another horse out well on the West Coast named Authentic that has already qualified for the Derby. So Charlatan and Authentic are the top 2. But it really was, it was a hobby. We've been very fortunate to make money. It is called the sport of kings for a reason. I mean, it really, you could lose a lot of money fast. I've seen people buy $1 million yearlings that never race a day.
Wow.
So, but it's a great business to be in. I mean, there is no greater thrill than watching, it's just as fun watching your kid hit a 3-point shot in a basketball game, but like winning the Kentucky Derby is a whole lot of fun, more fun than should be legal.
Zach Mansfield has a question. Zach, you're unmuted. There we go. Now you're muted again. Let's try again.
All right, there we go. So
Hey, Zach.
I was asking if you had any suggestions on overcoming burnout. Sometimes it'll be, you haven't hit any sales yet. It could be the weather's bad. You're just in a funk. You still need to keep going. Do you have any advice or little mantras that you say to yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, Zach. One of the things one of the things I live by is that I don't worry about things I can't control. When it's like you mentioned weather, like in the video rental business, our weekends were always really busy, and if you had a really nice weekend, I mean, you lost all this revenue. And I remember Joe Malusian, who was the CEO of Movie Gallery, he told me one time, he's like, man, Rick, I don't really worry about the weather because there's 52 weekends and it's going to average out over time. And another story I always like to tell is I was talking to one of my buddies down in Dallas, had a bunch of tanning salons, had a big competitor. And I said, Tony, what's Palm Beach Tan doing? He's like, man, I don't really care because I can't control what they're doing. I can only control what happens inside my 4 walls. So, I think, at the end of the day, if you only worry about the things that you can control, if the weather's out and people aren't coming in to buy something, it's nothing, that's out of your control. And, time will take care of itself. And, the other thing is be patient. It's not, I know that, things can, not be great sometimes, but at the end of the day, you got 365 days in the year. You're gonna have some good days, you're gonna have bad days. I mean, I live a very blessed life, but I still have bad days. I mean, I still have days where my kids are bad, or my wife and I are arguing about something, or, I get a flat tire in the car. I mean, it can be any of those things, but, just worry about those things you can control, be the master of your own destiny in that sense, and go from there.
All right, I got Rachel Lasser from Charlotte.
Awesome, Rick. So that was actually a perfect kind of segue into my question. So we talk a lot about controllables and non-controllables in our office. And so we can't control, like when we get back into store, but obviously we're controlling, coming into work every day, having these meetings. So what are some of the things that you guys are focusing on that you can control in your business? And what are some things that you're doing during this time to not be stagnant and like keep moving forward?
Well, a good portion of our team is still coming into work every day. We're not on a mandatory lockdown, and we're able to, safely distance ourselves here in the offices. So we're still working. The things that we're working on today, which we think is just as important, it may be the most important thing, is on, what does reopening look like, and what does, there's certainly a lot of unknowns, but what is this new world that we're going to live in look like? There's 100 different variables, from what consumer expectations are, what we can control and what we can do. And I did an article with the newspaper recently here, and I'm like, there's only so much I could do. We can set all these rules up in our stores, but at the end of the day, consumers have to comply. And I see it. I was laughing about it. I was in Whole Foods yesterday because my wife sent me to the grocery store, and they have these one-way aisles and nobody's following it. Like, and I just got to laugh, and I'm like, hey, well, here's the attempt, but here's exactly what I was telling the local paper was, consumers have to comply, and and also, the other thing I preach, I mean, just what I said to Zach was, we don't have any control of the situation. We certainly are have lobbying efforts. We're talking to the governor's people on a regular basis, saying, here, hey, here's who we are, here's what we're doing, here's how we're going to do this safely, and pushing to reopen. Especially in the tanning salon space, we don't want to get lumped in with hair and nail salons, and so we're working hard in that sense. There's still a million things to do. At the end of the day, we still have to operate a business. We still have plenty of employees. We have retail storefronts all across America, and so there's still a lot of jobs to work. We're still building stuff. I've got, I think, 3 or 4 Planet Fitnesses under construction right now. I've got 8 Buff Cities under construction, and so then we've got to deal with our franchisees, which is like being a parent as well at times. So having to listen to them. A lot of our franchisees want to voice their concerns, and they very much look to us as mentors or advisors. So we're having to take those calls, and that's where I'm spending a lot of time. I've generally been coming in the office for probably first 4 or 5 hours of the day, and then start taking phone calls at home after lunch, and and sometimes those go into the night because time zone differences and everything that's going on. But I think that's it. I mean, there's still again, patience and worrying about what you can control. And I mean, right now, if you're not in your storefronts, there's not a lot to do from controllable standpoint in the stores.
I think that leads well into Thomas's question. Thomas, you there?
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Thomas. Good. How are you?
Pretty good. Thank you for getting on the call. I really appreciate it. This is a lot of really great information.
Oh, you're welcome.
I just had a quick question. So if someone on our team relies on us really heavily to the point where they're doubting their own ability, how would we, I guess, push them to be their own person?
Wow, that's a tough one. I mean, I think you just got to continuously coach them. And, again, that comes down to, I might consider that emotional maturity and, maybe a self-confidence issue. And, that's all you can, you keep preaching that to them. And that's a really difficult one because, I mean, that is a very much an emotional maturity issue. And they either have it or they don't. Sometimes over time that self-corrects as they grow older and mature, but sometimes it doesn't.
All right, Rick, I got a question from TJ in Charlotte.
All right, thanks, Adam, and thank you, Rick, for
TJ
giving some good information. But got a quick question. So, what are you doing right now? I mean, obviously we're in this pandemic. So what are you doing right now to kind of motivate you and keep yourself locked in order to influence others?
Wow, that's a tough one. I mean, these are certainly unprecedented times. To keep myself motivated, I'm trying to exercise as much as I can. I'm blessed to live across from the largest park system, or the largest park in our city. I've got a 600-acre park right across the street from my house, so I'm spending a lot of time in the park, and there's a lot of space there to do things and get some fresh air. So I'm certainly doing that. It's really tough. I mean, these are, we're in uncharted waters. I mean, there's, the uncertainty. A lot of people don't do well with uncertainty, but every time I start getting worked up or worried about that, I always fall back to, I don't really have control. And it goes back to, what I talked about earlier, worry about things you can control. And the end of the day here, I'm just like you guys. It's not like you're closed and no one else isn't. We're all in this. We're all in this together. I keep hearing that phrase. It's kind of overused at this point. I'm tired of hearing it. But we truly are in this together. And I don't see, anything that we have control of that I could change at this point and change what the current circumstance is. So I think it's just, being patient, worrying about what you can control, living your best life at home.
Awesome. I got Sarah has a great question. Sarah, you're there?
Yes. So have you ever had a time where you had some limiting beliefs that held you back? And if so, how did you handle that?
Wow, that's a good question. I don't know that, I think there's been times where access to capital has been my limit, where I'm always, been pretty aggressive and, maybe jump ahead of myself early in my career, and then work things out. But things always tend to work themselves out over time. And again, if I don't have control, there's nothing I can do. So, trying to make, good decisions, and, well thought out decisions has always kind of been my thing. And, not trying to jump the gun on certain things, and just, giving things time, giving a lot of thought, put in a lot of thought to everything, I guess would be my main answer. And, again, if you don't have control, don't worry about it.
I got John Colby from Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah, quick question. How do you build relationships with your team, but still keep it professional?
That is social media today, that's certainly a challenge, because everyone, there's a lot of people in the younger generation likes to, post every aspect of their life, at work, at home, at play, which, can be problematic as an employer. It's really, it's tough, I mean, when I'm outside of work, a lot of my work friends are personal friends too, because you end up working with people and becoming friends with them. But, you do have to make sure that there's always a divisive line in there at the same time. But, some of my best friends are guys that worked for me for 20 plus years. And I mean, they're like brothers. So it really is a challenge. But, I think it's respecting boundaries is a big thing. You want to get to know your people, and it does get harder. That's the one thing I really miss about being a part of a really large company is, I used to know every manager's name, their spouse's name, their children's name, and, and build that personal relationship with them. And that gets harder and harder. I now, of the 26 people here in my office right now, I mean, I know, all those things about them, but I can walk into a store and I probably don't even know the manager's name, to be honest with you. And that's, it's sometimes embarrassing, but it's just kind of the reality of the situation. So if I do go out to a store, I do call and ask to tell my mom I'm coming, and make sure I write down the manager's name and so forth. But, you just got to respect those boundaries, I guess, is my answer is, it's fine. You can be friends, but you just got to make sure there's enough boundaries in place.
We have time for one more question. We got Jefferson Bell. Jefferson, ready? There we go.
Oh, hey, can you hear me, Mr. Rick?
Yes. Hey, Jefferson.
Awesome. Thanks for taking the time to talk with all of us today. I wanted to ask you about your point that you were making earlier when you were saying that when it comes to your line of business, that people who put off time with their family are typically people that you don't really want to work with. Is that what you were saying earlier?
Yeah, it's not that they put off time with their family. It's that if they don't put their family first, I've and I don't want to offend anybody, but I've never met a crappy parent that's a great employee. I think there is, at the end of the day, it really comes down to, the type of person you are. And if you're a bad parent, you're probably not a great person per se. And I don't, maybe I'm sure there's some exceptions, but that's kind of my general rule is that, hey, be a good parent, be a good husband, wife, spouse. And you got to make time for those things in your life. I mean, you have to. There's, because there's probably, some of you guys. I mean, there were 300 of you on the call. 20 years from now, 10 of you may still be here. 290 of you probably are in another profession as you have grown and moved on. And you've got to just take everything into consideration. And your kids and your family are going to be here 10 years from now. This career may not be, it may be. And, but take care of your family, put your family first, and everything else will fall into place.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that for for the future leaders that will be growing once everything goes back to normal. Because it's something that I've always struggled with trying to explain, because I don't have any kids. I have a very small amount of people that I have to be there for. But how do you explain how to prioritize different people that you need to like put into your schedule versus like the goals that you're trying to work towards with creating like a better life for yourself?
Well, we certainly have schedules as well, and scheduled hours that we expect people to work, whether you're part-time or full-time. But still at the end of the day, I mean, it's great if somebody wants to work 80 or 90 hours, but we know that's not sustainable over a long period of time. I mean, we've seen that. Someone mentioned burnout earlier. You will burn out if you work 80, 90 hours every week. I did it when I was younger and wasn't married and didn't have children, and that's fine. I think it's part of growing up and maturing and hustling. But it's I don't know, it's a delicate balance, and it's somewhat tough to explain. And I think at the end of the day, it comes down to maturity and integrity. I mean, what does a person expect of themselves?
And Rick, I think a big piece of that too is you've got people who, there's a big difference between making sure you're there for your kids and being a great parent. If you're somebody who's coming into a business with kids, a lot of the people we hire, some people we hire have kids. A lot of the people we hire have, friends that they want to do brunch with on Saturdays. And so there's a big difference. You got to have fun. You got to make time for that. But I think that, the importance of placing your children and your married life as a priority as you're growing your career is very different than choosing before you have that not to grind.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a good point. And, taking that into consideration here, it's, again, at your age, and, if you have to choose between brunch and work, you might want to choose work, and that may end better long-term. And, and whether you want to have that fourth or fifth drink on a Saturday night and you got to be working Sunday morning, that's a whole nother choice. That's a whole nother delicate choice too. Right. But no, that's a very good point, Adam. And, again, priorities, you got to prioritize what's most important in your life.
We always had an expression: the last one at the bar is the first one in the office. I'm sorry. So Rick,
that's sometimes very painful.
It can be. So do you have a final piece of advice? We got a lot of young entrepreneurs on the call. Final words?
One word: hustle. I can't say that enough. And that's what I tell people all the time. I get a lot of people that reach out to me and ask me for this type of advice. And at the end of the day, it's hustle. If you want it, go get it. Because there's plenty of people that aren't going to do it. If you want to stand out in today's workforce, hustle. Because if you do that, you're going to win.
That's awesome. Well, we have a tradition here at the end of these calls. I'm going to unmute everybody so they can all say thank you. So everybody's unmuted. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's confusing to start.